Welcome to another episode of the Growth Through Adversity podcast with your host, Ragnar the Warwolf. What is up, people? So, today we are going to talk about specificity, peaking, and deloads. And those are just fancy ways of saying that we're going to talk about how to effectively build a program to reach the goals that you want and why we do some of the things that we do. You guys that are in my program will see these kind of things regularly. Even if you're not totally aware of what's going on, they are in there. So, to start, like, if you understand this, it's the difference between, I always say it's the difference between training and working out. When you have the proper programming, you have the proper amount of volume, proper amount of intensity, proper amount of recovery, you're training the right energy pathways, the right muscle groups, and you're training with intention, then you're actually training. You're not just working out. Just working out is just going to the gym and lifting weights with no intention and no structure, right? So, what's going to happen when you do this right is you're going to recover better and you're going to perform better. You're going to recover faster, you're going to perform better, and you're going to optimize your results, right? So, rather than staying stuck for years doing the same things over and over again, you're going to actually get the results that you want to get. So, we got to start with specificity because there's an old quote, adaptation is specific to the demand placed upon it, right? So if you don't actually define what you're training for, you're literally just exercising. So you have to have an idea of what do I want to do? Do I want to build muscle? Am I training for some kind of sport? Am I training for a race? Am I training for strength? Like all of these require slightly different modifications to how we build the programming, right? And like a great example is there's a fundamental difference between how I trained as an MMA fighter and how I train today, right? Because I still carry some of those elements from my MMA days into my training, but I'm definitely much more focused on like a hypertrophy centric type of workout. So more on building muscle and then just kind of maintaining like some of those tactical elements that you pick up in training. Whereas in MMA, it was the exact opposite. I didn't want to put on too much muscle because then I would have to go up a weight class. The cuts would have been harder, but I wanted to be incredibly fast. I wanted to be incredibly strong and I wanted to be very explosive and have really good endurance and cardio. So I trained specifically for those type of things. And it's literally everything requires a little bit different of a training structure. So whether we're talking about strength, whether we're talking about hypertrophy, fighting, racing, fat loss, tactical performance, longevity, all of these require, there's going to be some carryover and some parallels that are the same, but they all require slightly different structure and slightly different training. And what we're really looking at when we're talking about specificity is what is your body specifically adapting to? And that's going to be your energy systems used, right? So whether we're looking at a lactic, an alactic, or an aerobic type of energy system as the predominant energy system in whatever you're training for, the movement patterns that you're going to have to perform. So what specific movement patterns do you have to be proficient at if that's relevant? Intensity levels. So there is like a great example would be the difference in intensity between a sport like baseball and a sport like sprinting, right? So baseball is there are fast outbreaks, but there's a lot longer rest pauses in between it. Whereas sprinting is going to be all out, for as hard as you can go for a short amount of time. So understanding the intensity level of the sport versus marathon running, which is going to take hours and hours and hours and hours at a very low intensity. And then you have interesting sports like MMA, where it requires a little bit of everything. You have to have a really good baseline cardio to be able to maintain long rounds. You have to be explosive. You have to be strong. You have to have these powerful outbursts. So it kind of blends a lot of different things together, which makes it even more complex to program for. Rest intervals. How long are you going to be able to rest? And then duration of effort. How long do you need to expend energy and effort? Once you have an idea of these things, then we can kind of build a program around that with specificity. So the first thing that I always look at is energy system specificity, right? So what type of energy systems do we need to train? For somebody that's just interested in hypertrophy, fat loss, we'll do a little bit of everything. So we're going to train the alactic system, which is 0 to 10 seconds. Bursts, that's a purely cellular energy stored. This is going to be max effort, max strength, explosive power. And then it's going to require a very long rest period afterwards because we're going to exhaust all of the energy that we had in those muscle cells to do one very dynamic, very powerful, explosive movement that's going to take less than 10 seconds. Second from that is you have the lactic system, which is kind of like your intermediary between aerobic, like long distance endurance stuff, and like alactic, explosive, powerful work. And this is going to be like really hard intervals, 400-meter sprints. It's going to have a relatively shorter rest and a high burn. It's kind of blending the two energy pathways together. And then we have aerobic energy, which is very long distance endurance events with recovery is really happens as you're going. You're using oxygen to fuel this. So as you're going, you're constantly restoring the oxygen, and it's why you can go for so long. So now, if you're a bodybuilder, we're going to kind of train all of these. If you're focused on hypertrophy, we're going to kind of train all of these because we're more interested in making the muscles grow. So, using all of these energy pathways will make your muscles grow, ultimately, with emphasis on the first two. But if you're a competitive fighter or a racer, or a long distance racer, you're not going to want to train like a bodybuilder because if you do, you're going to be absolutely cooked in your sport because you're training the wrong energy pathways and you're building up the wrong systems. And that's where specificity really becomes relevant. So then we have motor pattern specificity. This is your nervous system adapts to patterns, right? So a great example is that strength is essentially a skill first, right? So building strength has more to do with the connections, the neurological connections from your brain to your muscles in the beginning than it does with the actual amount of muscle you have on your body. It's once you tap out that neurological potential of strength that you really then start to rely on building more and more muscle to create strength beyond that point. But in the beginning, it's learning those motor patterns. And once you learn those motor patterns, your body knows them instinctually. So like learning how to squat heavy is learning how to squat with good mechanics. Learning how to bench press heavy is learning how to bench with efficient mechanics. Um, and now, and building strength in those movements won't necessarily translate immediately to some kind of sport specific movement. It will over time. And that's kind of the caveat there is that building strength over time as you get more proficient in training the motor patterns that you need to be proficient in, the greater strength will carry over into it, but it's not an immediate carryover. So like fighters, my fighters, we focus on drilling pace and on the pace of a fight and on the motor patterns that they need in fighting. Strength guys, I focus on drilling bar speed, tension, and just overall being able to generate force very, very, very quickly and very efficiently. Physique clients, we're working on hypertrophy and volume, right? So different goals require a little bit different structure with some similar underlying principles. Another thing that we have to think about is the rest periods, right? So, rest defines adaptation in many, many ways. 3 to 5 minute rests are these long rests that are going to be very efficient for building maximal strength and also can be very efficient for hypertrophy as you can increase the amount of work you're able to do because you're giving your body adequate rest and then having a very high intensity set taken very near to failure because your body was able to go that far. 60 to 90-second rests are like your traditional hypertrophy rest range. They keep your heart rate up. It's much more intense and it's effective for building muscle. Anything under a 30-second rest and you're not giving your muscles time to restore cellular energy, you're not giving your muscles time to oh, I forgot over here. You're not giving your muscles time to actually recover. So what you're doing is you're basically, it's just conditioning at that stage. You're building up your endurance and you're building up your conditioning over time. So what I see too much of in the gym is that people just kind of like randomly focus their rest based on how they feel, and that can be effective for advanced lifters. Like you get to a point where you kind of get enough biofeedback from your body that you know that you're ready to do a next set, and resting any longer is counterproductive. But in the beginning, you should at least tentatively be kind of keeping track of how long you're resting and trying to stay somewhat within a reasonable window. A pretty good like generic target is probably somewhere between about 90 seconds and maybe 3 minutes. That's going to get you a lot of the best of all the different worlds, while still kind of keeping your heart up, still keeping you warm, and ensuring that you're not resting too long. And so, number two, this is only going to be super relevant to people that are like training for something specific, right? Which a lot of times I'll have clients set like micro goals where it's like, I want to do this in this amount of time, right? And it's kind it might maybe it's arbitrary, maybe it's not, but what's cool about that is you can focus on peaking for that event. And all peaking means is that we're going to have like a strategic manipulation of volume, intensity, fatigue, and recovery leading up to whatever we're trying to be in the most optimal shape for. Um, the problem is that if you train with the same intensity year round, your body never gets a chance to peak and then to get the needed rest that it needs to fully recover from that peaking and let everything fully heal up and your central nervous system to de-stress and your body to just fully make a recovery so that you can go through another peaking phase. And what happens is this leads to burnout and plateaus. You end up just kind of feeling tired, feeling run down, and just kind of getting average results because you're not giving your body what it needs, which is bouts of incredibly high intensity and then bouts of less intensity to recover from that incredibly high intensity so you can get back to doing incredibly high intensity, which is what really gives your body the stimulus that it needs to change. So like peaking structure, and this is going to be like probably a little bit advanced, but it's still a good thing to have like a foundation of. So the first phase is what we call an accumulation phase, and this is why our program takes a year. This is why we train in year-long blocks, and it's all literally mapped out from the very beginning. And these are the phases that we go through in that block, right? And so the first phase is accumulation. It's higher volume, more moderate intensity, where we're building that foundation, that base, letting you get familiar with the motor patterns, letting you get familiar with the movements, comfortable in the gym. And we're slowly building muscle and we're building up your capacity for work. What will follow that is phase two, intensification. We're going to lower the volume and go through strength blocks where we're going to have higher intensity. We're going to have much heavier weights and we're going to have more specific work that's going to cause a lot more fatigue, but it's also going to get you a lot better results and a lot more adaptation. But you can't do that second phase without first building the foundation, or else you're going to set yourself up for either burnout or even worse, God forbid, an injury. And then the final phase is the realization or the taper phase. And this is where we're going to kind of deload. We're going to drop the volume significantly. We're going to maintain relatively high intensity. We're going to increase our rest intervals so that we're staving off the fatigue. And this is going to allow the fatigue to slowly dissipate and our central nervous system to freshen. Now, if you're a competitive athlete, this would happen right before you went into competition. If you were a fighter, this would be the last couple weeks of your camp. If you were a sprinter, this would be the last couple weeks before your competition. And the idea is that we want to maintain all the progress that we've made, but we want to let our body de-stress and our central nervous de-stress. And it's good to do this in training, even if you're not training for something specifically, because it periodizes your work, breaks it up into periods, and it makes it to where you're able to recover from everything adequately and able to continue to make progress on a macro basis. So, looking at your progress measured over the course of years rather than days or weeks or months. So, what happens after we go through that peaking phase, right? You don't want to stay at the summit. That's another mistake that I see a lot of people make, especially in my fighting days. We saw fighters do this all the time. They would just go from one fight camp to another to another. I did it for years. It's kind of part of the sport. But what happens is you don't actually let your body fully recover. And so you just kind of have like this cumulative fatigue that continues to carry over and carry on over and carry over. So post competition, we want to do what's called a deload, where we're kind of focused on active recovery, lower intensity, and just rebuilding the base. So we're basically starting back. We're going through a deload phase, and then we're starting back at phase one. And this is literally like the process that I carry clients through year in and year out because it's effective. Now, in these phases, lots of stuff will change on a year to year basis as your work capacity increases and your body changes, but the phases are uniform. We're just going through them over and over again and making changes intraphase to get you different results over time. So what happens is that the accumulation of fatigue accumulates, and fatigue is what we're really talking about is fatigue on the central nervous system, and it masks your fitness. So you're never like just gaining strength. You're gaining strength and you're gaining fitness, but you're also accumulating fatigue in the process. And there's a point where you gain so much fatigue that you can no longer gain strength or fitness or muscle or whatever it is you're pursuing because the fatigue threshold is just so high and your performance drops. Your body just can no longer recover from the amount of fatigue that you put on it. And you get into what's called an overreach state. And the only way to combat that is to make sure that we do regular deloads. Now, I will put the added caveat in that this only becomes super relevant for intermediate to advanced lifters. So in the beginning, like your capacity for work is so low that you're not able to accumulate enough fatigue that you really need to take deloads. This becomes relevant when your work capacity is so high that in order to get any stimulus on your body, you have to create so much fucking fatigue that your body is just gets overloaded with it, right? Um, and so this is something that I don't really look at in the first couple years of training with somebody. Like if I sign somebody up who's new, I'm not really like putting them through a deload every 12 weeks. This is more for advanced, at least intermediate to advanced lifters. And your body will start to give you feedback and let you know that you need to deload when it's starting to get overstimulated and when it's starting to get ran into the ground. So once you get to that phase, it's usually every 12 to 16 weeks. It again, it varies. Sometimes you won't need to do it. I don't schedule deloads based on weeks. I schedule deloads based on how your body is responding or how my body is responding. And when we start getting biofeedback that indicates that we're overtrained or overreached and we're starting to have problems, that's when it's time to look at doing a deload. So why deload? Number one, it's going to restore your nervous system. Number two, it's going to reduce joint stress. It's going because in training this hard, you are beating the shit out of your joints. The soft tissues around your joints, tendons, ligaments take a lot longer to recover than muscles do. So what happens is they get broken down, especially tendons get broken down with muscles, and muscles heal, in a matter of weeks. Tendons take months, right, to completely heal. Now they will heal a little bit along the way, but what happens is you can do so much damage to them that you begin to outpace their ability to recover from it. And a good deload cycle can help, those tendons fully recover and be able to not, get those cumulative, bicep tendonitis or other overuse injuries that can occur with that. Another thing it'll do is it'll lower your systemic inflammation, which is obviously important for just about everything that you do. And it's going to improve your hormonal balance and it's going to resensitize your body to stimulus. So we're not just training to stave off injuries and overuse. We're also a little bit of a deload can resensitize your body to the stimulus, right? Because you train so much and your body just gets so adapted to the training that's why we're always shifting and changing. Like for my clients, you guys will see that usually on about a monthly basis, we're changing out your training templates. We're changing out the training blocks. We're making adjustments. We're taking a barbell bench press and doing a dumbbell bench press and taking a dumbbell bench press and doing an incline Smith press. And it's because we want to constantly keep your body guessing. We want to do the movement patterns that work, heavy pressing, but we want to change out the type of pressing that we're doing so that your body doesn't just adapt to just always only ever doing the bench press for 10 years. Like, it just kind of it allows your body to resensitize to the stimulus. A deload does that on a major basis. So a lot of times when after a deload, what will happen is, we'll be stuck in a plateau and then we'll shatter that plateau. You're also much less likely to get injured and it's much more sustainable, right? Because you have intermittent breaks in there and you're not just like doesn't feel nearly as hopeless that it's just always constantly super difficult because it's broken up into periods and cycles and phases. If when you need deloads, you ignore them, what's going to ultimately happen is you're going to get burned out. You're going to stall in progress. Those are the two most common metrics we see. And worst case scenario, you're going to end up getting hurt. Usually it's like an overuse injury, bicep tendonitis, some kind of tendonitis, something like that just sucks. So the way that we deload is very simple. We want to reduce volume. I cut cut it in half. So whatever our volume is, our aggregate volume, we just cut it by 50%. So if we're doing, let's just say 10 sets per muscle group per week, on a deload week, we'll do 5 sets per muscle group. You want to keep the weight moderate, but you do want to reduce the intensity. So usually by just so if instead of training at an RP of 9 or 10, we're going to train at an RP of about 6, maybe no more than 7. We're not grinding out those reps. So it's almost like what a deload really feels like is you're going to the gym, you're going through your warm up, and then you're going home. Like you're going through one big warm up where you go through all your little warm up sets for your workouts, and then you just go the fuck home. So what we shouldn't do is accumulate any fatigue whatsoever, but what we should do is put a little bit of stress on the muscles, get some blood moving around, and just make sure that we don't lose any of our progress or lose any of our gains, and also just keep our body in the mode of training. So we're still moving, we're still training, we're just reducing stress and stimulus. So though bringing those three elements together is are some of the core elements of good programming, right? So when we talk about good programming, we're thinking about specificity. What are we training for, right? You know, and if it's just like longevity and health, then it gives us a lot more flexibility. If it's something specific, then we need to make sure we're training specifically for the motor patterns that we need, the energy demands, the rest cycles, all of the specific elements of that, or else you're not going to get any more proficient at it. So specificity, and then peaking, right? And then going through the different periods of training throughout the year and whether we're actually peaking for events, competitions, etc., or just running our body through the different phases, higher volume, lower volume. And then deload is kind of like the key to putting together program on a macro basis when we're thinking about things on instead of in weeks or days, but rather we're looking at the big picture of what is our training going to look like for the next year. And you should be thinking in those matters. Like really, again, it's the difference between just going to the gym and working out and actually training with intention. And one of them, produces very little results, and one of them produces excellent results. So strength is built in cycles. Growth isn't linear, it's wave based, right? So we go through growing phases and then we go through cutting phases. And it's important to push yourself hard, but it's also important to recover properly. And that's why I always say, like, we want to train hard, but we also want to train smart. And this is a lot of the things that we're thinking about when we're building programs for you guys and mapping things out on a year. And then we want to also be very precise. You know what I mean? So everything is scientific and everything is precise because it's what works, right? There's nothing random or arbitrary about it. It's training with intention and it's training with intelligence. And then repeating that over long time horizons. So that's all I got for you guys today. This is going to be my last live in Texas, which is kind of crazy. So I'm going to go ahead and open it up to my clients in the Zoom here for any questions you might have. If you have questions, just go ahead and unmute yourself and ask them. You can ask me anything. It doesn't have to be specifically about that. I'm going to give it a couple of minutes here for you guys to muster yourself. Instagram, good morning. Yep, and you can also ask them in the chat if that's easier. Okay, Chantel, I'm gonna unmute you.
Hello, sir.
Hello, how are we doing, Chantel?
I'm doing all right. So, question, when
Yep,
you are taking your breaks, what is the max? I noticed that like the harder workouts, like the squat, for example,
yep,
I notice if I take a longer, like say 2 minutes break, I
yep.
tend to do better doing my next set. So, what is the longest like break time that I should be taking during like those harder workouts?
Yeah, that's a fucking great question. So honestly, it is very much tailored to the different exercises. The one you used as an example, squat, is a great example of an exercise that it might literally take you 5 minutes or longer to recover completely from a squat and be able to get another effective set. Um, the metrics that I look for, and at the level that you're at, you're pretty advanced. So what I would look for is I would look for your body's feedback. Number one, like cardiovascular. So when your heart rate calms down to a semi-normal beat per minute, like you're still can be over 100, but it shouldn't be beating at fucking 180 beats a minute and feeling like it's going to explode. And when you're not sucking air, like you're gonna die, you know what I mean? That's the first thing I watch for. Number two, like when my body stops involuntary shaking, that's another good indicator. And number three, just like kind of like when you know you're ready to do another set. When you reach that point where it's like, okay, now I'm just being a pussy and I just don't want to go. I just don't want to go in there because it's gonna suck, but I know I'm actually ready. That's what I would look for, is those three metrics right there. So cardiovascular recovery, when your heartbeat goes down to a semi-normal rate and your breathing returns to normal, when your body's no longer shaking involuntarily, your muscles spasming and shaking, and when you just kind of feel like you're ready. And on a hard exercise, like on some exercises that might be as short as a minute, minute and a half. On a move like the squat, I would expect somewhere in the 2 to 5 minute range, especially on a hard set, with like, 6+ reps. Like, yeah, that's going to take some time to recover from.
Okay.
Does
That's
that make?
what I was guessing. No, yeah, it does because I've noticed even like with the dumbbell bench press or like the bench press, if we're doing 6 to 10 reps and that, I'm kind of heavier on the weight, I've
Yep.
noticed that if I take a longer, like 2 to 3 minutes, hold on, please, wait, a 2 to 3 minute break, my set is better.
Yep. And that's the key. What you just keyed in on is the key, that if you don't rest long enough, it's gonna take away from your next set, right? So you're not gonna you're on a set you could maybe do 10 reps, you'll only get six reps, so you're leaving 4 reps on the table that if you would have just rested another minute, you would have been able to get. And ultimately, the more volume you put on the muscles, the more tension you put on the muscles, the more they're going to grow and the stronger you're going to get. So, yeah, you hit it right on the
Okay.
head. Rest long enough to be able to, your sets, if you're doing two working sets and you get 10 reps on the first set, you shouldn't only get like 5 reps on the next. And if you did, it's probably because you didn't rest long enough. You should get like 8 to 10 reps on your last set too.
Okay. That
Cool.
makes total sense.
Awesome. Great question. Thank you,
All right.
Chantel.
Thank you.
Yep. Later. Okay, so Nick is working, but he asked me in the chat. I've been sick with the pneumonia for the last week and a half. I want to get back in the gym, but I should I take it easy once I do? Yeah, definitely. So your body can only recover from one thing at a time. And if you're sick, especially with something serious like pneumonia, your immune system is working in fucking overdrive trying to recover and trying to kill whatever it is that's causing the pneumonia. So, let your body fight one thing at a time. Whereas if you go to the gym, break your muscles down, fry out your central nervous system, your body's going to have to try to recover from that on top of the pneumonia. And just neither one's going to recover really well. So, what I would do is wait till you're feeling like 80% better. And then I would go back to the gym and just like walk on the treadmill and see how that feels the first day. And then maybe the next day go in there and walk like on an incline, or maybe do a couple of like circuits on the bike and get your heart rate up a little bit higher, see how that feels. If that's good, maybe do like like a deload, like a 50% of the workout on the weights, really light weights, 50% of the volume, and just go through that, see how you feel. So we're just slowly tapering back into it. But you shouldn't just be going in there and like gassing yourself the fuck out when you're recovering from being sick like that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, can you hear me?
I can hear you good.
Yeah, I just got back to work today for the first time in a week, so
Yeah,
I'm about halfway through my antibiotics and the steroids they gave me,
perfect.
and yeah, the last time I worked out, I got through about halfway through the first set of incline bench, and I just instantly all my energy was gone.
Yep.
And I went home, and then the next day I was like, oh man, my throat hurts. And the following day, I started getting the runny nose. It basically started building up to having a cold,
Yep.
then bronchitis, and then
Fuck.
and then I finally went to urgent care, and they did the X-rays, and they're like, "Oh yeah, your lungs are full of fluid, dude."
Oh,
And
lovely.
so for about the last, let's say, 5, 6 days, I've been on antibiotics and steroids trying to clear it out.
Cool. Yeah, no, so you at that 5, 6 day mark, like you're not contagious anymore. What I would do is I would just go in there and just get on the treadmill and just work, or just walk, like light walk, you know what I mean? Do that for a few days. And once you really start feeling better and you're like, able to get through that without any fatigue, then like I said, go back to like a half a workout, but just ease into it. Like don't so many it's like if you just try to push through it, you're just gonna make it worse. You're gonna be back at ground zero and starting over. So yeah, let your body recover. You're doing it right.
Okay, and my last question: when I do get back to actually weight training, should I expect a little bit of loss in the
Yes.
amount of weight I'm lifting?
Yes. Yes, but it should be temporary and fleeting because you're not going to have lost like, you haven't been bedridden for months. You're not going to have lost any muscle or anything, but you're not training like you were every day, so your body's not as adapted to it. So yeah, expect a decrease in performance and then it'll recover probably within about a couple of weeks. And
Okay,
expect to get really sore again. So you got that to look forward to.
I'd rather be sore than sick. So,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But yeah, expect a little bit of decrease, and then but it should be relatively temporary.
all right, thank you,
Of course. Hope you feel better, bro.
thank you.
Tyler, did you have a question? No.
No,
Okay. I'm gonna just mute you there. Chantel, I say walk on the treadmill and do a sauna. Hey, so Nick, Chantel's a nurse. She said she would also like what I said, walk on the treadmill, do a sauna. That's a great idea. I didn't think about it. That can help you just kind of sweat that stuff out and get things moving along. Sweat everything out, make you and make sure you're super hydrated. Yeah, so then drink a bunch of water and electrolytes afterwards. But yeah, that heat, like that induced fever, that's one of a fever is one of your body's mechanisms for killing that kind of gunk. So if you can go and sit in the sauna, I've noticed that too. When I'm sick, it can help you pass it a little bit quicker.
okay. I heard electrolytes. How about the amino acids stuff that I have too? Does that
You
help? Or no?
not with hydration, which is what she's talking about. If you go sweat in the sauna, make sure you're hydrated. But I mean, we've talked about amino acids before. They're not going to hurt anything. Cool. All right, guys. Thank you guys so much. Next time you see me on Thursday, I'll be in Anchorage, Alaska. It's exciting. Hope everybody has a fantastic week.